In August 1945, with the smoke from the war in Europe only just clearing, all thoughts were bent on the downfall of Japan. One man with a special interest in the future course of the war was Major Charles Sweeney, selected to command the second mission to drop an atomic bomb on a Japanese city.
When I was first told about this thing, it was in September of '44, and a lot of my friends had been killed in Europe, guys to whom I was very close. My heart was broken for him, not to mention the Marines and other guys out in the Pacific and elsewhere in the world. But I was particularly heartbroken because I knew these guys in the flying game, many of them. And so I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if we had a blonde, just go like this and stop the war? The security guy picked me up in a jeep and took me out in the desert and said, we're going to brief you on what we're doing here because you're going to have to help train the crews and so forth. He said, we're working on one bomb one bomb will do this, and he said, it'll turn a whole city into this. And he just threw a bunch of that sand. And I said to myself, my goodness, this could be the magic wand.
In any scenario to defeat Japan, a key instrument would be the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. In many ways, the B-29 was the first bomber of the modern era. It was pressurized, streamlined, and it could carry 10 tons of ordnance against a target 2,000 miles away and return to base. More importantly, a single aircraft could carry a weapon capable of devastating a city.
The B-29s were all based within 60 miles. They were based on the islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, based on size, availability of space, and all that sort of thing. Runway ability and what have you.
3 multi-year efforts came together in the Marianas, one military, one technical, and one scientific. The capture of the Marianas by U.S. forces under Admiral Chester Nimitz was the culmination of a drive across the Central Pacific that began in the fall of 1943 at Tarawa. The development and deployment of the B-29 provided the means to project the war over the Japanese homeland. The U.S. began construction of 5 massive air bases in the Marianas, each capable of supporting 180 B-29s.
We used the resources of the theater forces, namely the 20th Air Force.
And finally, the development of the atomic bombs would enable the B-29 to carry the most terrible weapon of war ever conceived. The stage was set for the 20th Air Force's bomber offensive against Japan. With Japanese cities already under constant air attack, Major Sweeney and the 509th Composite Group, commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, moved to Tinian from its training base at Wendover Field, Utah in June 1945.
Now, we had other groups doing the regular bombing missions and mining missions and other missions doing that. They were firebombing at this time, practically 100%. But there were, among the other groups, at one point, and I think it was around that time, a lot of mining in the Japanese approaches. The war was won outside of with the A-bombs, was with fire bombs. After March of 45, we dropped very few, we as a country, dropped very few HE bombs, mostly fire bombs with a salt and peppering of HE bombs to spread the fire.
Strategists in Washington and operational commanders, notably Major General Curtis LeMay, devised and implemented low-level area bombing attacks against Japanese cities using incendiary bombs. The effectiveness of area bombing with incendiaries made up for technical and operational problems with the B-29s that had thwarted precision bombing efforts. Japanese industrial production was concentrated in densely populated urban areas. Scattering or eliminating the Japanese workforce was an important, if secondary, objective in the firebombing campaign. The first fire raid against Tokyo was judged so effective that more than 60 other Japanese cities would be ravaged by incendiaries before the atomic bombs were dropped.
We were 1,500 miles from Japan. Iwo Jima was 750, so they were just halfway there. That's where the B-51s were. They did have to carry external tanks, which they jettisoned, and that's how they made it, to get up there and support some of the so-called conventional bombers. We didn't have any fighter support. We experimented in the States as to whether or not a Japanese fighter could get up to us and be effective. We stripped an airplane of all guns except the 220s in the tail, which didn't shred the streamlining, and we therefore took 80% of the gun weight and ammo weight out of the airplane. We had in, Tibbets did this on his own, he had in a Dr. Workman who was an operations analyst, capital O, capital A, and he was a mathematician. He figured that the Japanese Zero could get up to our altitude and get somewhere near our speed, so that if they were there, they could make a head-on pass, but they could only make one because if they tried to turn, they'd fall out of the turn because of lack of enough air up there for them. In other words, they were underpowered for what they would love to do. For the head-on approach, we figured the guy would have to be on a perch, and I'll never forget Tibbets said, the mathematics are that they'll be closing at 1,000 miles an hour. But now then, what are you going to do about a tail chase? If they were up there waiting and they started to chase us on the tail, they wouldn't catch us. And if they did, that's the reason we kept the 220s in the tail. Now, if they caught us and they took a shot at us, and the 20s were harassing them, of course, if not shooting them down, and they missed and they fell out of that turn, they wanted to come back and hit again, they couldn't do it. They just could not get back. We figured by stripping the airplane, as we did, that we were in pretty good shape as far as the threat of enemy aircraft. Anti-aircraft was a different story.